Outside the Piazza Cafe, I flopped down onto the wrought iron chair at my usual table. It was a place I'd meet colleagues, and we'd been charmed by its extravagant rusty lamps, cheered its occasional power cut, and savoured its collection of antique mirrors and liquor bottles. I figured I could ignore the messages from Sanjeev a little longer, and glanced over at the modest fountain in the centre of the piazza. Eva, the timing of your disappearing act was immaculate. Why hadn't you replied to my messages? 3 days. What did I think I was doing? Playing at private eye, stalker, or lovelorn romantic? Perhaps all three. I scanned your apartment's exterior and favourite makeover shop in the square. As morning lost its freshness, my concentration gradually worsened. Thoughts skittered about. As the days dragged on, it was important that my surveillance aroused no suspicion to the casual observer, a theoretical pair of eyes which could have belonged to a police officer, fellow smart worker, or one of the waiters. I would have given them a face and a name if my head hadn't already been overflowing with half-truths and lies. I wanted to appear as a harassed employee of the prestigious smart organisation with an impending game deadline. And, as I was both these things, this part was relatively easy. My observer could watch as I sat diligently working at the cafe, or took light lunches of ham omelette, or one of the cafe's delicious pastries. They would have heard me talking small talk with waiters, or taking a meeting with my boss. They would have surmised that I had a good relationship with him, and this is where you, Eva, might not have seen eye to eye with my casual observer friend. Would it be too strong to say you despise my boss? For these few days, I have been spectacularly ordinary. However, an insightful observer might have noted that, in the course of my work, I had paid undue attention to the fourth-floor apartment on the other side of the piazza. A more lenient soul might have said to themselves, "It's an attractive enough building, and the poor man needs some respite from his work. Surely he is allowed to take in the sights of this pretty locale, the apartment included." However, a slightly more scrupulous observer might have rebuffed this claim, noting that I discreetly checked the apartment on numerous occasions to the point of obsessiveness. This self-same watcher might suppose that my work-associated actions were little more than a simple pantomime, and that the real reason for my diligence was to stake out your apartment over the entire 3-day period. They might then seat themselves on the table behind me and discern that my positioning among all the tables in the cafe was the optimum spot for regarding your window. At this point, they could have submitted their report to whichever body they served. You would laugh, Eva, if you could have seen me. You'd always said I was so transparent, but there was one thing in particular that struck me now. Sitting across from you, after your previous extended absence, you told me you were being followed. At the time, I didn't know how seriously to take your words, especially as you'd shrugged them off so lightly. So following your cue, I forgot about them as we talked about other things. But was there something I'd missed, Eva? Something you tried to hide from me? Whatever thoughts preyed on my mind, I had to accommodate my precious observer. So in order to cast aspersions on their burgeoning theories, say that I was a bored stalker, I routinely roused myself from my table and walked to the library. They might surmise I had a date for game touch or a psych play session with friends, and that would have been precisely what I needed them to think. However, if they'd tried to track my movements through the numerous hacked surveillance channels, they would have seen that I appeared to be sitting at my cafe table as before. This was one of my favourite smoke screening hacks, as it allowed me to wander about unbothered. Martino, my usual waiter, brought over coffee. Marbling product played across his hands like slowly billowing coloured smoke, and travelled up across his neck, an exquisite mix of blues, oranges and yellows. He enhanced the overall effect with a practised nonchalance. Bravo. I stared into my coffee as if I were peering into a two-way mirror behind which stood an interrogator, silently judging my every movement. And this wasn't everyday surveillance anxiety. I was tempted to touch it, as if it were made of glass. Then I realised putting my fingers into my coffee cup would undo the good work I had done so far on the behalf of my imagined observer. I pulled up a new projection for my card. No messages from you. Lots from Sanjeev. There were still a few days before the premiere. Plenty of time to do last-minute adjustments to the templates that he wanted. The more I pretended everything was normal, the calmer I felt, and that was very pleasant, especially when I didn't know if my life was about to change irreparably.